These are dangerous times, and we are a conquered people. The Romans who occupy our land can be quite cruel, and make no mistake about it. A conquered people have no rights. A conquered people have no hope. A conquered people are useless if they're dead. Those are the facts. My name is Joseph ben Caiaphas. I am the high priest of the Holy of Holies and of the Jewish people. My father-in-law Annas was a high priest before me, and I am highly skilled in dealing with the religious order, the Sadducees, Pharisees, and Essenes, as well as the Romans, and even King Herod himself. I understand their wants and their needs, and I know the wants and the needs of our people. These are dangerous times. I am called on to be a spokesman, a voice of reason, a peacemaker. To that end, I understand that every situation has two sides, much like a coin. A wise man understands both sides of that coin. On one, we have Rome, who occupies our country, formidable presence, and can be quite cruel. And on the other side, we have the Jewish people, with their proud customs and traditions, wanting freedom. For myself, I'm the edge of the coin. I'm the one who has to balance both. And that is not an easy task. The Romans simply want the Jews to be peaceful, to not make any trouble. They want them to pay their taxes. They want them to show their allegiance to Rome. In exchange, we have certain freedoms. You will not find any graven images in the temple. You won't find Caesar's face there. We are allowed to practice our religion, even our feast and holy days. We're even allowed to practice our laws and customs as we wish, including sentencing, even for capital offenses in those rare cases that would require death. Well, at least we could. 5 years ago, there was a zealot, it's a rowdy bunch, who disrupted a Roman supply line. The Romans captured him, and by rights they should give us to them for a trial, since he was Jewish. Instead, they killed him. And they took away our right to deliver a capital punishment. We no longer have that freedom. A reminder to us that if we can't keep the peace, our freedoms will be taken away from us. It only takes one troublemaker to upset it all. That brings me to Jesus of Nazareth. I've heard of him, but paid little attention until a man named Lazarus came around. You may have even heard the story. Lazarus told us that he was dead for days. And this Jesus came by and brought him back to life. Okay, the facts. First of all, Lazarus is alive. We know that because we talked to him. Therefore, Lazarus was never dead. There was no priest who came and inspected his body during that time of death. We don't know if he was really dead or simply in some odd catatonic state. I assure you, it was the latter. The people make up these stories. Jesus just happened to come along at the right time. He doesn't deny it. People tell us that he can let the blind see, he can heal lepers, and all sorts of other magical things. Such nonsense. Some have claimed he's the Messiah, the Son of God. That's blasphemy. I am the high priest. God speaks only through me. and I interpret his words to give to the people. He is not speaking through some uneducated carpenter. Like any of us, we also have two sides of a coin. We have life, we have death. For Jesus, if he could not tell his followers that this is all a fraud, stop his preaching and his teaching, and for the good of the nation, he must die. We watched him. We watched him carefully. We even set up scriptural traps to catch him, to show what a fraud he was to his followers and his believers. I will say this, for an uneducated man, he really did seem to know the scripture rather well. He was very clever with his words. We could never catch him. Our only saving grace is he taught out in the countryside and in small towns. But we learned that was about to change. He was coming to Jerusalem for Passover. The place would be filled with people. If he brought the crowds over to his side, the Romans would certainly find out. Our stability would be destroyed, and we would lose the few precious freedoms we have. We could not allow this to happen. And when he came into Jerusalem, it's just as we feared. The crowds were cheering and praising his name. I myself went over to him as a voice of reason. Calm the crowds down. Get them to disperse. The Romans will find out there's a riot about to break out here. Think of the people and the good of the people. But he refused. Days later, he went into the temple and he turned over the money changers' tables. People were not able to buy sacrifices to atone for their sins. Screaming and shouting and making a commotion in our sanctuary. We could have arrested him just for that. A few days in a jail cell wasn't what we wanted. We needed a more permanent solution to our problem. Judas, one of his 12, one of his own, the only one of them that had the wisdom, that could see the bigger picture, that knew that Jesus was indeed a threat. Judas told us where we could find him alone, away from any of the crowds. A garden on Thursday night. In exchange, we gave him 30 pieces of silver. By law, that's what we have to pay. It is the price one pays for a slave. Judas would also have to point him out to us. We knew who he was. But according to our law, the accuser has to point out the accused. We didn't want any loopholes. On Thursday night, we went in the garden of Judas. We brought some Roman soldiers, and we brought a crowd. We have been working a crowd up all week long. We found a group of people that really didn't know Jesus. And we told them about all the horrible things he's been doing. And if he continues, how they're going to lose their freedoms and be put to hard labor with the Romans. We worked them up into a frenzy, and they were quite angry. We brought them into the garden too. The Roman soldiers would see the crowd. They would report back to their superiors about what a problem this Jesus truly was. We needed to move fast. We took him out of the garden, and we took him over to the house of Annas because it was the closest. And that's where we held trial. This was the hardest part for me. Quite frankly, we didn't have any charges against him at all. People claim he's the Messiah, the Son of God, but we've never heard him say that. It's all hearsay. We needed a confession. Annas came up with a great idea. He thought we could bring in witnesses who said they heard him say that. And so we paid people to come in. We gave them stories to tell while we sat in judgment. It's a waste of time and resources. These people couldn't get their stories straight. Sometimes they contradicted each other. It wasn't working, and Jesus sat there and said nothing. Finally, probably more out of frustration than anything else, I got up and I approached him myself. As judge, I'm not allowed to talk to the accused, but I couldn't hold back. I went right up to him and I said, "Tell us, are you the Son of God?" And he said he was. I couldn't even believe that worked. He confessed in front of all of us. We had exactly what we wanted. 5 years ago, we could have put him to death for blasphemy. But now, we had to go to Rome. So we took him to Pilate, the prefect in that area. Pilate was not amused about being brought outside for a trial late at night, wondering why we couldn't do it in the morning. We explained this unpleasantness needed to be taken care of before the Passover holiday. It had to be done now. We explained what a threat this Jesus was. Pilate looked at him, he talked to him, Jesus said nothing. Pilate was bored, unimpressed, and said we had to go to see King Herod. He's Herod's problem. We took him to Herod, and the same thing. Jesus said nothing. Herod was unimpressed, said go back to Pilate. We're back to square one. We were getting nowhere. But this time we were a little better prepared. We had the crowd go over to the palace. Surely if Pilate could see what he does to the people. We told him of all the horrible things that were going on, and still Pilate refused. It took some time, way too much time. But Pilate finally saw the way. He saw the light and sentenced Jesus to death. I was on that hill as he hung by the cross. You might think I was pretty happy about it, but all these things had to fall into place to make this work, and I'm amazed that they did. But there was one thing that really bothered me more than anything else. One thing as I stood there. I really, really wish he would have broken down. I wish he would have cried. I wish he would have recanted all of his silly statements. I wish his followers could have seen that, to see how foolish they've been to follow him. Most people do, but he didn't. I have to give him credit for that. The closest I got was while he hung there from the cross, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" I thought, perfect. His followers are going to think that God abandoned him and that they were mistaken for following him. What the followers probably didn't know is those are the first words of Psalm 22, a psalm that ends in triumph. I made a note to talk to the other religious people, the officials. We would not be quoting Psalm 22 in our sanctuary, in our temple, for a year. I don't want anyone making that connection. A crucifixion is a horrible way to die. The mind starts to go, and it was certainly evident in Jesus' case. You could see that. At one point, he said, "Father, forgive them." He got his words all mixed up. Who forgives their enemies? Does he have any idea what he has put me through in the last year and a half? I don't accept his forgiveness, and I certainly don't forgive him. What else? There was something else. He said to the criminal that was also on the cross next to him, he said, "Today we will be in paradise." Paradise? I don't know what paradise those two are going to find themselves in. But believe me, I'm not going to be there. His last words, "It is finished." And my first words, it is accomplished. People have asked me if I've learned anything from being at the cross that day. I told them I was just reminded of the things I already knew. Order and stability must be maintained at all costs for the sake of the nation. It is better that one man die than a whole nation perish. On this day, history will record me as a great peacemaker, as the one who could bring that stability together. And for him, I'm sure his followers will forget about him by next week. His words, his teaching will simply vanish into nothing. There is something he said to me that I can't seem to get out of my mind, though. It keeps repeating over and over again. The Nazarene said, "For what does it profit a man to gain the world, but to lose his soul?" I'm not sure what that refers to. I don't know why I keep thinking of it. No matter. I'm sure if it's important, someday God will explain it to me.